I'm listening to a podcast, Black Lodge Trivia Night. I've never heard so many game aspirations in my life.
All right, welcome back to Black Lodge Trivia Night. This is Art here once again, solo. We're going to be doing a little bit of a Bookhouse Boys. You can sort of guess what it might be about based on what you're seeing in front of you. We're down in Matt and Patrick. They are helping cast the new James Bond film now going on in London. I like tuxedos. I like doing a horrible British accent in front of actual British people, but alas, I was not asked. So I'm going to be going over something that has come up a lot on the channel. If you remember a couple of weeks ago at the time of this recording, through the very exact and powerful science used by college basketball playoffs nationwide, we did a sort of round of 32 bracket challenge for the best RPG systems. You know, I was the one who did it. Patrick did a bracket, and we have a copy of it, and I forgot to get into it when Patrick and I were doing our Damn Fine Coffee. I meant to do that, but we didn't get to it. The One Ring second edition came out on top of my brackets, which genuinely surprised me, but maybe it shouldn't have. I've done 9 solo sessions, I think, here on the channel. I've had a really good time with it. It did get some lucky draws, but when I was talking through my bracket, it made me appreciate how much of a good time I had with that game. So what I wanted to talk about today was role-playing in Middle Earth. Now, some of this is going to be, you know, sort of rehashing and sort of collecting in one place thoughts I, you know, blather on about in my One Ring sessions, and maybe more so in the first one when I get into it a little bit. But the thing I've often said is, like, I'm not a Tolkien expert. I actually don't love the novels, but role-playing in Middle Earth has been one of the biggest chunks of my gaming experience. And yeah, let's talk about why. So why do I like to play RPGs in Middle Earth? Again, as somebody who doesn't love the books and who is not an expert on Tolkien lore and who doesn't, you know, have like a dog-eared copy of the Silmarillion. And I think step one is nostalgia, and it starts with MERP, Middle Earth Role-Playing. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this aside for now. We're going to focus on Middle Earth Role-Playing. So I probably said this, you know, in some of the videos. The first RPG I was introduced to was Dungeons and Dragons. I couldn't tell you what edition, but I was about 8 years old. It was a friend's older brother, and I was instantly fascinated. My mom gets wind that I've become instantly fascinated with this new thing on the market called D&D. It wasn't that new, but she responds by, you know, digging around a little bit and realizing it's a portal straight to hell. I'm going to become a satanic worshiper. Maybe I would, you know, get lost in the steam tunnels, whatever it might be. It was going to kill me, and it was going to corrupt my soul. Ace up my sleeve, my mom was a huge, huge Tolkien fan. When we were little kids, she read The Hobbit to us. She read the Lord of the Rings trilogy to us. Again, as kids, I remember, you know, sitting at the foot of a chair while she would read to us. She was a massive fan. So when we saw this on the shelf of a Borders books or something, I was like, oh, it's a role-playing game, but it's clearly not going to be a device of Satan because it's Middle Earth. It's from J.R.R. Tolkien. So I think my mom, you know, in my best, 10-year-old self, giving her that checkmate look, I think she's like, okay. And she let us buy. This is not my original. I couldn't tell you what actually happened to my original. This is probably the third version of this I bought. But and so there's a strong sense of nostalgia. And, you know, this is one of the first RPGs I really got into, poured into. And I can tell you this cover is exactly why. There's something about this cover that really hooked me. And if you look at it, I don't know if you could say it's truly Middle Earthy, like as far as like the books go. If you know, sort of like, you know, looting treasure from I know that's sort of what Bilbo does with, you know, Smaug's treasure chamber, but dungeon diving is not really the point of the story. So, but this captured my imagination, and I wanted to do that stuff as a kid. I wanted to go sneak into tombs and, find treasure and gold and things like that. And this was a chance, I think, to get the option to play a role-playing game in that kind of fantasy setting. And it just happened to be Tolkien, Middle Earth. That was the way in. So some nostalgia. But what I will say is over time, what I've come to really appreciate, and this is something I think I talk a lot about on my Lord of the Rings Online playthroughs, is that the setting of Middle Earth feels, and this is going to obviously be a strange thing to say, but the setting of Middle Earth, as far as fantasy settings goes, feels more realized, more real. I don't know if I'm using the right phrase, but I'm looking over here because I've got some things I jotted down because my memory's a sieve. But it feels like, and let me say, and I think part of what makes it feel like a more realized, more real fantasy setting is because I think it has the advantage of being a singular vision. You get something like, Forgotten Realms. You get even like the setting. Oh man, I'm blanking on the one for Pathfinder because it's only the 17th best game in our repertoire. So of course I'm not going to remember it, but it's that's a joke. It's quite good. It just had a rough bracket opponent. So those always felt like, kitchen sink kind of options, like they try and appeal to everybody. And, Patrick and I talked about this when we were, tier ranking RPG settings, in our Damn Fine Coffee a session or two ago. And this does not have that feeling. This feels like it has a singular vision, and that vision had sort of a point of view. And maybe the point of view has become sort of like the backbone of every generic fantasy, starting point since. But I think it's hard to argue that it doesn't have a point of view. I think it was a very particular setting. It has a rich history that there's a lot of extra depth that's there that goes beyond what was needed to tell the story of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. But I feel like those stories come off as a natural evolution of all that history and all that, so it doesn't feel like they were done in a vacuum of each other, right? Like there's this, very compelling, story. Maybe you're saying it's ripping off whatever that, that opera is or whatever, but it's got a basic story that's pretty compelling with characters and things like that, and a rich setting that's, described and realized. And then, Tolkien's nerdy jam was to go really deep on everything that nobody really needed to know, but I think he wanted to know it and he wanted to create it. And I think it truly does shape the stories that were the focal point of the setting. So I don't know, but I do feel like there's something about Middle Earth that feels more real than most fantasy settings. I'm also not a huge fantasy fan. So I think that's why I, as somebody who doesn't, necessarily love Middle Earth, has loved playing games in it. But why would you not role play in Middle Earth? And I think it's something the One Ring sort of alludes at, is that, the setting material is intimidating. I've said this when I was playing some of the Lord of the Rings, the One Ring. I'm like, I feel like I need to know everything to do the story justice. And this book even at one point kindly says, like, don't worry about it, man. You're cool. Just play it. Just tell your stories. Don't worry about like getting every detail right. Like, don't let it stand in the way of your fun, which again, it's something that should be obvious, but it was helpful. I found it helpful to have the book say it out loud, but I think that's one reason why. I think another reason why is something that Patrick got into, which I think was a good point, where like they've already sort of told the most important story they're going to tell. And I think that has sort of like a gravitational pull on whatever narrative you're going to have. Either you're actively, circling that story, or, you're trying to tell your own stories in that world, but I think it's going to be difficult for the main story to at least not bleed into it a little bit. Like, is it just the same thing with like the names change? Like somehow I feel like it's too much of a presence in most like fans of the genre's minds to be able to completely divest yourself from it, if that makes sense. So I think that might be the biggest reason. And even if you end up sort of doing that with, say, like Dungeons and Dragons or Forgotten Realms, I feel like whether it's conscious or unconscious, that's more of a choice because it didn't have to be that way. Where this, I feel like it's just such a looming shadow. It's hard to get out from under that. Also, fuck Tom Bombadil. I said it. Yeah, no, I said it. His dumb poetry, his skipping around, don't like it. Number one reason not to role-play Middle Earth. Anyway, so let's get started. So my experience with Middle Earth role-playing has been on paper and pencil front twofold. Middle Earth role-playing from Iron Crown Enterprises, often referred to as MERP, BRP. This was the original box set, I think. This is definitely the one I got from this version of it is the one I got from the bookstore. Comes with a rule book. It's based on Iron Crown Enterprises system Rolemaster, which was a very crunchy, well, it still is, a crunchy, cumbersome, but we had a good time with it, but it definitely is not like a smooth ride. And this, I think you can make the argument, is Rolemaster Light. So let's, I always loved this box set, get the rule books. I don't know if this is actually like the full set. You get a little list of errata. There's one table I was looking for. I was wondering if it was even included. I never really looked at the errata. You get some like counters, I guess to help do some stuff. But anyway, so couple things. I've said it a million times, my voice goes in a heartbeat. It's also like 1,000,000 degrees outside, and I've got like 2 striking lights there. So we'll see how this goes. I might just faint under it all. You'll just see me key and peel sweating like by the end of this. But basically, this system is complicated. The way I thought, this isn't going to be like a completely in-depth anything. If this looks interesting, you should truly, there's actual plays. Maybe someday we'll actually play this, but I don't know because I don't think Matt and Patrick have any interest in it. But basically, this game is a D100 system. You randomly generate stats, and I think you roll D100s, and you have to get above a 20 if you get and then you can, I think, assign them as you want, and then you pick your class. Again, this is really rough, really broad. And once you pick your class, I think you can then swap your class's main stat to a 90. So you put your dump number into that, because you're going to be able to swap it out for a 90. Then what that translates to is translates into a bonus, which is actually so you get the value, you get your bonus, you get a little bonus from your race, you get your total. Then you start, that would be like your strength total would then go right here. Then you start to get ranks, and ranks of movement and maneuver, weapon skills. You can see most of it is like things you can kind of do in combat: movement, weapons, subterfuge, casting spells, there's a couple of general skills though, right? Like, so it's really, you can sort of see the focus of this is really kind of in the sort of, it's not an action, fast, quick game, but you can tell it's more of that kind of thing, like forward. And so you start to like get a certain number of ranks, which you check the boxes off. These are worth 5 points each. If you get enough, these become worth 2. So if you had like 4, you get 20 plus your strength bonus, plus a bonus from your profession. If you get a magic sword with a +2. And by the end of it, and then like, plate, inherently has a -60 for moving and maneuver, right? Because it's hard to move. And then you get your total. And so when it's time to, do a skill check, you basically go to a table. And so here's like the moving maneuver table, which there's also like the table I was looking for was MT2, which is sort of like static maneuvers or something. I couldn't find it. I sort of flipped through the book a couple times. I could see it being very similar to this though, because why not? But you have like routine, easy. So the GM would determine like the difficulty of the task, and then you roll, and then you add your bonus, and you get your total. And then you say you're trying to do a medium maneuver, and your roll is a 76 through 85. This is why this is sort of like a weird system. It means you didn't fail, but you got 60% of whatever you're trying to do. You know, if it was an easy maneuver, you would get 100% of whatever you're trying to do. If you got something absurd, you would fail. But you can see there's always like a little bit of success. So it's almost like I don't want to say it's like a precursor to like PbTA, where if you get like 1 through 6, it's a failure, 7 through 9, it's a partial success with a cost, and then, 10 through 12. But you could sort of see that has some quality to it. You get some, and it's up to the GM, and it's sort of like, what's the difference between 60% and 50% of a skill completion? Like, is it time? Is it, it's like, so it might be a little too granular. But I think that is not the worst foundation for a system. It's just, it might be too much. The nice thing about this system, what makes it kind of cool, and I think I talked about this in my top 5 dice. One of the top 5 dice in my video was exploding dice. And so this system can explode down and up. So if you roll, I used to think it was like 1 through 5, but it might be 1 through 8, or it might vary depending on something. But if you roll really low, you roll again. And whatever that number is, you subtract from your first roll. So if you get like a 2, you're rolling down. So you roll a 50 on the next one. So you're at a negative 48. So you'd be at a negative 50 through negative 26. If you'd roll a negative, like on the second die, because it's now rolling high, if you roll like 95 to 100, it starts exploding like all the way down into the basement. That's how you can get to like a negative 151. If you roll like really high, like a 95 through 100, it starts to explode upwards, and you roll 95 through 100 again. You keep adding it until you get your total. And I remember, like, this is like I was saying, some of the nostalgia. I very distinctly remember playing a session. I think my brother was GMing it, and I was wearing plate armor, which you saw had a negative 60. And I was trying to do like either a very hard or an extremely hard maneuver. And the only way I was going to pull it off was if I rolled open-ended. And I think I might have rolled open-ended twice and ended up with like a 200, or, it was something out here. So I actually pulled it off. It was like, I think I was on a bridge that was collapsing as I was trying to race across it, but I was in plate armor. So, it's all, it was one of those gaming moments where like everybody's like, oh yeah, hell yeah. That was really cool. Not really cool, but you know what I mean, right? It's not captain of the football team cool, but you know what I mean? Like it was like a cool, like, hell yeah kind of moment, hero moment. That's, it's what makes role-playing fun. But, so that's the core of the system. The thing that most people, this book is very scant as a starting point. So luckily we're going to get into in a second, like the game is not scant as a whole, but what you get to begin with is pretty scant. The rulebook, covers certain things like, getting a character together and things like that. I would say it barely gets the job done of explaining the rules, but it's close enough. But you can see like it's really granular, and it's really like you get experience points for killing, you get experience points for casting a spell, you get experience points for doing a critical hit. You get, you get experience points for pulling off a maneuver. You get experience points for, I thought there was something else. But so you can see right there, right away, there's like 7 ways to get experience. And you're like, oh my God, okay, what are we doing here? As opposed to like, say, like the other games, where you got like, did you participate in the session? Yes. Did you keep your secret? Yes. But here it's just like, there's just a lot of stuff to pay attention to. And if you, and you can play this with like the full lower master rules, which are times 10. It may be more rewarding if you really, internalize the system and get used to it. And if it's your thing and you really enjoy it. But It is a lot. I do remember that. And I've talked to my brother since, and I think he said it wasn't terrible. It was just that we didn't play it enough. And he's like, I think if we had played it enough, it would have gotten smoother. It's just that we didn't. So yeah, static maneuver table M2. This, that's the table. It might be somewhere, but I could not find it in this book. There's a second edition of this, which I don't have. These books, you can't really get a hold of them anymore. I think Iron Crown Enterprise lost the Middle Earth license. I don't know when. Nobody has the license to this kind of stuff. Even like the One Ring, the way like the Silmarillion, it's all sort of weird limbo, because it's hard to imagine that in the 80s, Middle Earth and Star Wars were two properties that were not super hot. So like West End Games could get, the Star Wars RPG, Iron Crown Enterprise could get the license to this. And, but yeah, I mean, both companies eventually, fell away, and like whatever happened to their stuff, there's just not much you can do. Now, Loremaster, man, I don't know if Iron Crown Enterprise is still around or if somebody picked up the rights to it, but Loremaster PDFs you can still buy, but these PDFs, well, if you're getting PDFs of this stuff, it's almost certainly not official. You know what I mean? So I've seen PDFs out in the wild of the second edition, but I don't use stuff per se that I don't own. You know what I mean? So even though like this I bought off of eBay, I can't buy it from Iron Crown Enterprises. I wish I could in some ways, but I have a physical copy, so I try my best in that regard. Anyway, so a couple of things I think that turn people off from Middle Earth role playing with this system is I think a couple things. One, it's a very tough system to master. It can be cumbersome. It's not smooth. It's definitely by today's standards not up to speed in terms of like modern RPG game design. I really do feel like Free League has nailed a lot of things about smooth modern game design. But not that I think everything they do is amazing, but there is a lot of stuff I think they do right. And Forbidden Lands was one of those games that made me go like, oh, wow, there's a lot here that I think is really working for me. The other thing is what you're seeing here. There's a lot of magic. And you could say like, some of it makes sense, but like sand running, water walking, limb running, maybe water finding, fire starting, stuff like that makes sense. But does there's like firebolts, there's like fireballs and stuff. Like, does that make sense in a Middle Earth setting? I think a lot of purists would say no. But now I can't find it, but I do remember wind law, ice law, fire law, so you can get like fireball. Yeah. Level 8 fireball right there. Now when I started playing this game, I was like, oh, these are really cool because I wasn't an expert. I'm still not, but I wasn't like super hardcore into it. So it wouldn't have occurred to me that like, this is too much. Right. I think that's generally the biggest complaints that I've heard of when it comes to MERP. But what this game has that basically nothing outside, you could argue maybe the Silmarillion has is setting detail. You got special, like Balrogs, dragons, Dumbledores. You got, I do remember, I really liked like the herbs and poison table, disease, so I felt like you're starting to get a hint at sort of the richness and attention to detail for the setting, I never found MT-2, the static maneuver table. But anyway, it's a lot of like, basic like battle axe broadsword. This is the game that was the first time I encountered a Warhammer, and I thought it was pretty badass. But yeah, anyway, so like, again, the game, it does there's no, I think the second edition has a couple things. One, at the end of the book, it's got a collection of all the tables, so you don't have to be able to find them in the rule book. Two, it has an index, which this does not, which is a little brutal at times. I almost would say play Loremaster just so you can have access to things like indices and things like that. But right away, you start to get like a little bit of how good the art is, right? Like, even if this isn't like a literal Bilbo and a Gandalf, on horseback with a Legolas in the background, seeing what his elvish eyes can see, it's got some really great artwork. And then it goes into, race options that are a little bit more than just like elf, halfling, human male fighter. It gives a little bit of culture, stuff like that. But once you get, it does give you a couple of adventures. And let me just show you really quickly. And these are just little intro adventures, a hill troll lair, which is basically the hill trolls holding Led and Grum captive, have built their lair within Stony Hill surrounded by deep woods. So you're just going to raid a tower and rescue somebody. Pretty straightforward adventure. You could play this in just about any game. It's not like it's unique in that sense, but I do feel like there is something you're like, oh shit, man, I'm in Middle Earth. And even though you're having the kind of adventure you want to have, because everybody's so used to D&D, but I think there is something to be going like, oh shit, I'm in Middle Earth. But let's get into what the real strength of this system is. And that is, oh, you know what? Okay, so this is the basic Rolemaster rulebook, and I think I know I own this PDF on drive-through, and I think this is the unified. And I think what I did was I printed it at, I forget where I printed it. Somebody though provided the cover. I didn't make this cover. Somebody made the cover so that you could. Anyway, I think so, but yeah. So I have Rolemaster as well. But the real strength of this game is its supplements. I have a couple here. Again, these are not the easiest things to come by. So I do it a little bit at a time. I used to have more. I probably mentioned at some point I had a flood. This was one of the casualties, my collection of some of the original ones. So, you got Mount Gundabad. I've always wanted this one because I've heard this one is like a mega dungeon for Middle Earth, which I thought was kind of a cool idea. But let me start with something like Bree, because everybody knows Bree, right? So Bree and the Barrow Downs, they get like truly, in my mind, like truly evocative, stunning artwork. I love the fonts. I love everything about like the color palette. It's almost like a watercolor. It's really beautiful. But then what they do is, they give you a lot of history and a lot of detail. And like the war against Morgoth ended with terrible earthquakes, cataclysms. So it's not just saying like, hey, there's a shop here and it sells 3 tankards of ale for, copper, It's giving you like real history of the place. Third Age 17. I think that's what so it's really going back a bit. It gives you tons of different, so general prices, but it's giving you politics and power. Do you need all of this to play adventures? It's hard to say, right? Prominent families and personalities. But if you love Middle Earth, half the reason why you might be interested in this game is because like you want to role play in a setting that you love. And this game, MERP, delivers on that. Like you can never play MERP and you can feel like this is one of the best gaming investments you've ever made. And it's because of background information, the detail, the lore, filling in the blanks that were not really fleshed out in the stories unbelievably. But and again, like I don't know what their process was for coming up with this information. Did they have access to the Silmarillion, which has always been difficult to license in my understanding? But they go into the Barrow Downs outside of Bree. They give you like a Barrow layout, and then I think they're going to give you an adventure. But they're telling you like, hey, did you want to know the full layout of the Barrow Downs? Well, now you can, because this is going to break it down for you. The royal burials of Cardalon. So you can see like, okay, so yeah, they give you suggested adventures. They don't necessarily give you literal ones probably, but it's so they give you all this information and then they say like, hey, here's how you can bring it to life. But really you can see the strength of the book is all the detail leading up to it. I've talked a lot about Harn, and Harn probably will come up. This is going to be sort of like done in two parts. Like I'll obviously chop it together, but this is going to be done in two parts. And that might actually be a long one now that I'm seeing how long I've been rambling for. The first part's going to be going over here. The second part is going to be covering some other things, but I'll be doing that at my computer. So right now I'm in my murder hobo basement. Thieves of Tharbad. This was one that I've always been intrigued by. I don't know why, but I think what this does, I don't remember Tharbad from the books. I don't remember Tharbad from The Hobbit, or the movies. I know the Tharbad gets mentioned in the One Ring second edition as well, which is much more book focused. So I might be missing something. But what I always found interesting of Tharbad was that in my mind, it fell outside the normal stuff of the Lord of the Rings story, right? Like it had like a seedy feel to it. Literally, it's in the name, Thieves of Tharbad, that I don't really ever feel like I was exposed to in the movies, the books of the movie. And so what this sort of, in my mind, sort of showed me was what I think is the core of Middle Earth role-playing, which is this game is going to let you role-play in the world of Middle Earth. The One Ring is going to let you role-play in the stories of the Lord of the Rings, which it probably is pretty obvious what that difference is, but this stuff, like, all the history, all the stuff, it's just presenting you with the world and the details and the information. And it's not trying to guide you in what direction you take that. And this was the book, The Thieves of Tharbad, that sort of helped me understand it if I even remember it. Because again, there's just like, I remember the adventure in this. This is one of the adventures, like the Thieves' Quarter. Like, I remember that was a big part of whatever we played. But I do remember, like, oh, here's something interesting, though. It's like, those GMs desiring simple adventure may not be concerned with a particular period of temporal setting. They can, however, be... So you don't have to play this in the Third Age. I think that's part of it. Some of the books, I think, cover different ages. Like, you can play it at different times. But I do remember this extortion ring adventure and investigating this abandoned warehouse. And I just remember it just had sort of like a more grounded, gritty vibe to it that I really liked. You can see here, Third Age, City of Tharbad, 1410. I don't know the exact dates, but I know that like Third Age, 1410. So this has got sort of like a specific time, and I don't know when that corresponds to the events of the story, the books. But it was just like, I just remember this having that, like I said, that grounded, gritty vibe to it that wasn't a vibe you get from the books, really. And I realized, like, oh, this is sort of a gateway to exploring Middle Earth the way like Andor explores Star Wars in a different way than all the Jedi stories, right? Like you don't have to take it this way. You can sort of get in there, and this is what sort of uncorked my curiosity about like, oh, well, what can this setting, because the books I thought were okay. And I've always felt like a little guilty as a nerd for thinking that, but yeah, Thieves of Tharbad was the one that sort of helped me sort of solidify my thoughts that, maybe this is more about, exploring Middle Earth than exploring Lord of the Rings. Thieves of Tharbad. Angmar is not one that I grew up with, but it's one that I grabbed having played Lord of the Rings Online, because I think Angmar is sort of like the culmination of the first 50 levels, the original chunk of the MMO. But, again, it's just like, it's going to give you the land, the climate, it's going to the people, the cultures. It's going to give you all this rich amount of detail. And it's just sort of like an encyclopedia of Middle Earth, area by area. And I don't know of any other resource, honestly, like that. I mean, obviously now you're going to have like Wikipedias and things like that. But before that kind of stuff existed, for me, it was these games. I have Angmar. I've got Moria, which is, for these things, it's a little bit thicker than Tharbad. It's going to have, a whole breakdown of, huge chunks of the mines and what's going on there. And so again, it's just like this rich, detailed tapestry. If you want to sort of explore the idea of all of Moria, not just the Moria of the books, movies, whatever. Mirkwood was always one. I've always found Mirkwood curious. Again, Mirkwood's got the whole, these beautiful, this still has the original map. I don't want to pull it out, but the maps were you can see the maps are just stunning. I think the idea is you could sort of pull the staples out and then you have a double-sided map. I just hate to do that. And so not that I have, a ton of money. I, had to change jobs recently. I got, bills to pay, kids in college. But every once in a while, my intention is to just, sort of check out the eBay options out there and just see like, what's one I could go snag? What's one more I could add to my collection? I've got a lot of the ones I had as a kid. I've sort of rebuilt that, the ones I lost in the flood. Just so Mirkwood's does this have like Karn Doom? Is that what this is? I'm trying, again, most of my knowledge of Middle Earth actually comes from Lord of the Rings Online, but this seems like a pretty extensive. Oh, Dol Guldur, that's what I meant. Yeah, Dol Guldur. Karn Doom, I think, is Angmar, but yeah, Dol Guldur. So, it gives the whole layout of it. You shouldn't be running around there, but like all the information is there if you want, and it's nicely detailed. I would be willing to bet that this isn't just something they pulled out of their ass, that they probably have some grounding for where they got their information. But it's just absolutely beautiful. Just really quickly, Isengard, and again, this is maybe not even half of what's out there. Isengard, I always thought this was like a bitchin' cover when I was a kid. I don't know if this book is considered one of the better ones, but this one's already out, so I can sort of show you. It's just Rohan, just beautiful artwork. Artwork that I don't know if it was ever been matched on some levels. Of course, yeah, you got like Saruman's keep. So you got, anyway. But, and this will be a nice sort of comparison between the two, like Saruman's keep is not necessarily the only thing this book is really about. It gets into other stuff as well, which I think is really cool. Rangers of the North. I don't know much about this at all. I don't know, actually, this was definitely not one I had as a kid. So I don't remember why I got this one. I think I just, having played the One Ring, the idea of the Rangers, the Wardens, stuff like that. So I think I wanted to see what MERP had to offer in those areas. So anyway, and then finally, the last one I have is the Ghost of Southern Anduin. This was something I think I had as a kid. What this is a collection of adventures, which I'm always curious, like what a starting adventure is for an RPG, because I always feel like that's the game's opportunity to put its foot forward and show you like, hey, this is what we were thinking the game was going to kind of be. obviously you don't have to do it that way, but this is what we're going to put out there as sort of like a starting point. And I feel like it indicates a little bit of the author's intent. The starting adventures in the rulebook, as you saw, were very generic, like raid the tower on the hill. So I was kind of curious to see what they would offer as sort of like, I think this comes together and you can play it as a campaign. I don't think they're like individual. I don't think they have to be individual. I think you can sort of link them together. But so anyway, yeah. So that's what I have of MERP. But again, the main takeaway from MERP is that it's the way, it's almost like a companion piece to the Silmarillion. In my mind, that might be overstating it. I don't know if I muted there when I cleared my throat. That might be overstating it, but that's how it always struck me as sort of a more lay person that wasn't super into it. To me, there was just like, oh my God, there's so much information here. And it's at times fascinating. Sometimes it's too much. But I always feel like I'm glad that it's there if I want it. So now that was what I had as a kid. And, as I said, it's very difficult to get a hold of there are no PDFs, there are no like legal PDFs. There's no real way to buy it except like a really expensive, overinflated secondary market. So that leaves you as my other main, experience, the One Ring. So now, like I said, I did 9 solo sessions using the One Ring Strider mode, which is by... it comes with the box set. I don't know if there's another way to get it. Like, I don't know if they make this PDF available to anybody. I don't know if it's something you have to get through the box set or if you can buy it separately if you don't buy the box set. But it's by Sean Tompkin, who has done Ironsworn. Like, he's a big name when it comes to solo RPGs. Anybody who gets a solo, especially Free League, like Dragonbane, like they're always getting a little bit of a weigh in from Sean Tompkin. So, and honestly, it works. I think Francesco Nepitello, these two guys, yeah, they're the main designers of the original. Francesco Nepitello and Marco Maggi. I really apologize. But yeah, it does the trick. It modifies a few of the rules. It comes up with your typical oracles and stuff like that. It breaks down, some random tables, and it just makes it, I found it a really enjoyable solo experience. But let's get into like the One Ring and how it differs, right? Now, the One Ring very much, and I think, I was just mentioning the names of the designers. I swear, and I feel bad because I'm not going to be able to link to this, but I swear that I remember either reading or listening to an interview with one of the main designers, and I feel so bad if I misquote him, but what I remember him saying was like, he very specifically said, like, we're trying to tell the stories of the Lord of the Rings. We're not trying to tell the stories of Middle Earth. It's sort of things I've said that in a different way. And I probably think of it in those terms because I heard him say that in the interview, and it made me go like, huh. Because in my mind, I was like, why would you want to do that? Like, tell the stories of the Lord of the Rings it's already been told. But you get into this system. And so you get the character sheet. We'll sort of look at it the same way. You get a character sheet, which is, again, you get like strength, heart, wits. Within strength, you've got, some skills here. Within heart, you got some skills here. You got some there. What you do is you sort of choose a rating. It can either be like 5-5-5 if you want to be like a jack of all trades, or like 4-6-6 if you want, or 4-4-6, if you want to be really good at something. There's different combinations you can choose, and it's like usually 4-5-6. That's what you put in for your rating. Now, whatever that number is, you subtract it from 20, and that's your target number. So when you're rolling dice, you're trying to, I think, tie or better whatever that number is. Now, in the solo mode, they recommend like, hey, if that's a little too tough, you might want to, instead of subtracting from 20, you might want to subtract from 18. And I actually think that doesn't work too badly, at least early on, for non-solo gameplay. But I don't know how eventually, as you get stronger and stronger, like, should you survive and start upping your skills, I feel like at some point you'd want to flip the switch and then turn that target number from 18 to 20, just so you're not like blowing through things. But maybe it doesn't, I don't know. So, But I do remember the first time I tried this game, it didn't go well. And one of the things I remember was never being able to succeed at anything. And part of it was that we didn't know how to play. But anyway, the point is, like, when you do a skill check, you're rolling a D12. And then if you have, say, like athletics, you're doing an athletics check, every box you have checked off, you get to add a D6. So the D12 is going to be 1 through 10. 11 is actually sort of like an Eye of Sauron. And if you get that, like, there's some penalties to it. Like it can either, give you problems beyond the roll. It can make that die not count at all. Like, it can do different things depending on situations, but it's bad. On the 12 is like a symbol of Gandalf. I think it's sort of like patterned after the symbol he put on like Bilbo's door when the dwarves were going to come and have a meeting. Like, and that, so if you roll the Gandalf symbol, like, you automatically succeed. Even if you don't hit your target number, it doesn't matter. You automatically succeed. For every D6 that you add to it, if you roll a 6, that's like a bonus effect. So, which is pretty common for like free league games, where if you like roll like certain symbols, you like, does it let you do it in half the time? Do you get little bonuses? Do you get like a +1 to your damage? So that's sort of like building on that system. It also, what makes this game interesting, there's also a couple of things. Like, it very, very, very broadly smooths over things like treasure. Like, you don't worry about how much gold you have. It's like you get 3 treasure points, which doesn't always feel great as like a, like a classic RPGer. It's like you find a treasure worth 2 treasure points, and it's so abstract that you could argue, like, I don't know what that means, but it's not the craziest thing in the world when you're playing it in game. But it is something that, the downside to this is there's some things that really take some getting used to. There's a lot of systems, because it's trying to gamify like the types of things you encounter in Lord of the Rings, like the stories. It comes up with like a lot of different systems that you have to sort of merge together. Like there's, load and fatigue. It's not just straight encumbrance. It's doing other things because travel is such a big part of this game. Let's get into that a little bit. So hope, because it tracks like, like despair, which is something that I think is worth tracking in the stories of Lord of the Rings Online with Sauron and his encroaching oppressiveness. So you can get like miserable and weary. Those are like statuses you can get. Wounded is obviously what you would expect it to be, but miserable is something that happens like when, the shadow gets to be too much. Weary is something that happens if like you just, the toll of the road is weighing on you. It's the adventurers. One thing there's basically no magic. You look at the classes here, the classes in that game are like burglar, fighter. You could be like a mage of sorts. Let me just pull it up because I think it's very classic D&D. Professions 22. This is the first time I often say, like, part of the reason why I do these things is to practice different things. This is the first time I'm using this setup as it is. I've sort of worked on it a little bit. This is where sometimes I record wargaming. I haven't done it in a while, but I haven't had this particular setup before. And this is sort of, I think, like at its sort of end stage. So I'm kind of curious to see how it goes. But you got a warrior, scout, animist, a cleric. It even says like, hey, D&D equivalent right there. Mage, ranger, bard. So pretty classic fantasy RPGs. I think you could make the argument, I think this is what hardcore people make the argument, that animist and mage doesn't really fit. Like, there weren't that many Gandalfs in the world, right? So I think that's why a lot of people think it's too high magic, and you can cast fireball. So anyway. So in this game, your characters are, so you can be dwarves, bardings, elves, hobbits, men, Rangers of the North. This might be actually what made me go like, oh, there's a book from MERP about Rangers of the North. I wonder what that's about. Callings. Okay, you can be a captain, champion, messenger, scholar, treasure hunter, warden. I played a warden. no magic casters. I think that's the first thing you're like, huh, okay, that's interesting. And I think that's something they got right. You don't have a huge amount of gear, but it covers the basics, bows, axes, some shields. But here's what it starts to get. So there's a couple things you start to see why this is more about like the Lord of the Rings and less about Middle Earth. So something that's important to you is your company. Part of your company is your patron. Your patron is, you get to pick your patron. You can choose Balin, Bilbo, Sir Dan the Shipwright, Gandalf the Grey, Gilrain, daughter of that's, I think, Strider's mom, Aragorn's mom, and then Tom Bombadil and Lady Goldberry. Again, if you watch any of my playthroughs, I hate this. I genuinely hate this. I don't hate the idea of a patron. I genuinely hate the fan fiction list of your patrons. Bilbo Baggins, the last thing he wanted to do was deal with people, right? Like, he reluctantly goes on his adventure, and then he goes back to the elves and just is like, I'm just going to stay here. And you know what? Now I'm going to go to the east. I'm out. There's no reason why Gandalf the Grey should be middle managing. Yeah, I'm going to need you to come in on Saturday. And then if I could get you to come in on Sunday too. Like, Gandalf is not doing your bullshit. Gandalf, let's not make Gandalf the Grey have an email job in Middle Earth. You know what I'm saying? So in my mind, none of these people should be doing that. And I don't like Tom Bombadil. But I do like the idea that this game is trying to create a community. You have somebody who you report to. You have a fellowship focus, which means, the company's fellowship has a number assigned to it. And that number can be used to help you as you start to like run out of steam, as you start to get weary or overwhelmed. You can pull on these fellowship pools, and it's sort of, mechanic. You're pulling from a pool to reinforce your pool, but it captures the idea of like, hey, you're not in this alone, and we're all going to help you get through it, right? Which is not something that is necessarily important to role playing in Middle Earth, but it is something that's very necessary to the idea of role playing in a Lord of the Rings kind of story. You could pick like distinctive features, you can pick flaws, endurance and hope. Again, these are things that, counteracts the weariness and the exhaustion, being miserable. So misery and hope sort of go back and forth against each other. And then anyway, this is just the equipment. It's not that important. I find like the combat in this, Valor and Wisdom, is another set of systems that I think you can sort of start turning towards the dark side. Like, you can start to slip into like the shadow. And I think there are systems in place that, counteract that a little bit. I don't know if that's part of it, but they do give you, these virtues of Men of Bree. So everybody's got their own stuff. Like Man of Bree has Desperate Courage, Friendly and Familiar, Strange as News from Bree. But the game has like adventuring phases, which you would sort of consider like a normal adventure. Combat, I thought, was maybe a little clunky. I mean, Rolemaster is going to be super clunky. It's going to be very procedural and like, okay, this is taking forever. I found this system to work pretty well once I got a handle on it. You get to choose stances, which I thought was interesting. And there's an extra stance you can use in the solo mode. But, you sort of like decide, like, do I want to, like, that's a pretty classic D100. Like, I choose that guy to attack. What's the range? That's my difficulty. Did I hit? Here, you can if you do a forward stance, you gain attack rolls, you get an extra D6, but then everybody attacking you gets an extra D6. So, and these kinds of things make a difference because it can be so hard, like I was saying, to hit your target number. So you do sometimes do you roll the dice and take a risk? But yeah, the attack resolution was really interesting. Like you chip away at endurance, which I think is sort of like, if you're carrying too much weight, like your endurance is already chipped away at. And then attacks can chip further away at that until you're exhausted. This is actually something that's kind of present in Harn. Because I think in this game, like if you take your helmet off or if you drop your backpack and change your endurance, you can then make yourself, have a little more longevity in the fight. Harn has that similar thing. Like you want to have stuff in a backpack because of how it calculates encumbrance penalties and stuff like that. But yeah, so like special damage, I was saying like anytime you roll a 6 on a D6, that's what that is, that special icon right there. You get some bonus, right? So anyway, and then, this game doesn't do anything like a normal way. So it's not really worth me explaining it page by page. Just know that I believe MERP, if you're going to go with these routes, MERP is going to be a challenge because it's just 5,000 pounds of crunch. This is going to be a challenge because none of it's normal. But I do feel like once you, like, I think these are the target numbers. So like, what's the injury target number of a 20? I don't know. I confess, it's been a while since I played. Once you get into it though, I feel like it works pretty well and does a decent job getting things done. And again, like you can chip away at endurance, but what you're really trying to go for is a wound. And that's going to put opponents down quicker. So you're trying to get wounds, and there's different ways to do that. But this has like rules for council. Now, a lot of RPGs have social combat rules. This tries to maybe codify it a little more. Whether the extra codification enhances it, it's hard to say, but they do go for it. So they sort of, you make an introduction, you have interactions, you try and decide what kind of skills you want to use. They give you a bunch of different options. So it is nice that the social skills are very much like front and center. Like, hey, these are the ones that are going to come into play. Like they're not just, a waste of time. This is the thing I thought that was most interesting. Like a lot of games have journey rules, especially for free league games. Forbidden Lands has a lot of like, hex crawl kind of stuff. But what I really liked about this is when I was like, oh shit, like, sorry, like I said, my voice goes really quickly, which is partly why I'm going to do this in 2 parts. This, I get what they're saying, like telling the stories of Lord of the Rings instead of Middle Earth. And it's this journey system where I was like, I actually really like this. And that's what started to, whatever like difficulty I was having grasping it, or like, oh, I'd rather just play Middle Earth. And this did help win me over. So like a lot of free league games, like there's different roles you're going to need to cover for your journey. The first time we played it, we didn't have somebody that was good at everything. Like you need to sort of cover these things. Solo mode, they sort of help you out a little bit. But with a target number of 20 as the starting point and not having these roles necessarily covered because it was our first time playing and we didn't know what we were doing, it sort of created a bit of a, this is a strong way to put it, but it sort of created a bit of like a death spiral where we started to rack up either fatigue or whatever it was. We were getting so beaten down by the journey that by the time we got to where we were going, it just got obliterated. But you can see here, this is sort of like the idea, right? Like you have these little logs, and in Foundry, part 2 is going to, like I said, involve the computer. Maybe I'll show you some of this. They incorporate these tools through the community, through the Discord community. They've made templates that you can use to mimic the actual things from the paper and pencil. But you can sort of see, like, this, it's not just like picking 2 places on a map, seeing how long it takes, rolling a random encounter and playing that out. You can sort of see like you get individual travel fatigue. What was your role in the journey? And then you check like during different steps. You're supposed to sort of beautifully illustrate the path you're going to take. And you then like, there's a system for like how far you can go each time before you hit an event. And that's based on like your, say your guide or your lookout rolls. Like if you have like a good lookout roll, you can get further than if you shit the bed on that and all. You can get only so far before something jumps you or surprises you or you get lost. So you get very basic what these things are, right? Journey events, like is it despair? Everybody in the company gains a shadow. Why? You know, you sort of, it's up to you to determine these things, but it gives you sort of like a framework, almost like an oracle, like keywords. And then you can create your journal from that, right? Like you can sort of embellish the story of your journey. And it really does become like, when I was doing it in my solo run, it really did become like this narrative engine that I was surprised by. And like I said, that narrative engine was when I was like, oh no, I do feel like I am in the Lord of the Rings, the books, and I get what you're saying. Anyway, so yeah, and it's something you do like, you know, if you know you have to get like 15 hexes, you get 4 hexes the first time, 2 the next time, 5 the next time, and then, oh, I had 5, but I only needed to go 2, then your journey's over. You know, and where you are on the map matters, right? Like the Darklands are more dangerous than the Wildlands, the Darklands are more dangerous than the Wildlands, which are more dangerous than the Borderlands. And some of those things determine different tests, right? And you can see even certain things like 2, like that counts as 2 hexes. So it takes, you know, extra time to get through that bit of terrain, I think. Anyway, it's all of this stuff I find really, really well done. And yeah, so you can sort of like, you get like terrible misfortune, shortcut, like it gives you sort of an idea of like, it could be this, it could be that, but it's like I said, it's sort of bordering on like an Oracle-esque story generator for making like getting from A to B like a really fascinating time without it taking up either too much time or too much math or just a bunch of rolling on random tables. Anyway, the other thing that this does is in between adventures, you have like this fellowship phase, which is, it's like, it's a more involved downtime section than I think a lot of games get. Because I really think the idea, again, like, you know, the stories of Middle Earth, of Lord of the Rings Online, Lord of the Rings Online. Yeah, I was going to say take a really long time. Lord of the Rings Online takes a really long time. The stories of Lord of the Rings, you know, take months, years, whatever. And so this is part of that. So like every winter, you got to sort of, at a minimum, you got to stop and have like one of these fellowship times. So, you know, anyway. Whole section here about being a what do they call it? The lore master. That's what they call the GM. And yeah, I mean, it's a pretty good. It's pretty good. It, you know, Shadow is again like you know, the evil that's creeping on you. And eventually, if it becomes too much, you know, you sort of give into it, and there's consequences for that. One of the interesting things is like, you know, that's adversaries are talking about the stat blocks, but they have systems in place for like treasure. You know, it's like 3 points of treasure, but when you find certain things like precious objects, weapons, things like that, then they go into it a little bit more. And they want you to even sort of like, if you find like a sword, like you give it a name, so to speak, you know what I mean? So it does kind of encourage you to make a connection to your stuff. Eye awareness is the amount of attention the enemy has on you. And there's different reasons why they have, like, if you have like high elves in your party, that's a bump. If you've got Dunedain, you know, hobbits and men, they don't care. But if certain things happen, like if you use magic, if you gain shadow, when you roll Eyes of Sauron and certain things, like all these things sort of make Sauron be like, hey, what's going on over there? And then eventually, I think it leads to the hunt. And, you know, when I was showing you the map here earlier, the hunt's going to come quicker on the Darklands versus the Borderlands. The threshold you have to get to, I think, is less. You can see perilous area. Might not take longer. Just there might be some modifier to passing through there. Anyway, so you can see like there's a lot of like very specific systems that I think you could argue are kind of gamey. It's like, you know, this tracker and that tracker that I think it could get cumbersome. And I think, like I said, it's not what you often get in classic fantasy RPGs. And I think I have been frustrated by this game in the past, and I have run players through it that were getting frustrated as well. And I think that's part of it in my mind, is the idea like it has these things that, you know, like I remember the first thing I reacted to in this game is like, why am I rolling a D12 and then these 3 D6s and subtracting this number from 20? And, you know, it seems like a lot of work to get to the answer of a, did you pass a skill check? But once I started to play it, I started to get a little bit, and I really enjoyed it. But part of what inspired this, you know what, I'll just throw them all over here on the side for now. You're going to see stuff in the corner. It's not going to be pretty. Part of what inspired this is that Hand of the White Wizard just arrived. It's a Kickstarter. I kickstarted it. It's the newest book that I've gotten from the series. I really enjoy it, but I think this book sort of gets a little bit. Oh, there's Tharbad. Like I said, Tharbad's definitely covered in a couple of these books. I think this book, when I started to flip it over and see what it was, sort of drove home the idea of MERP is for playing in Middle Earth. This is for playing in Lord of the Rings. And I wasn't 100% sure what I was getting with Hands of the White Wizard. I thought I was getting like a reference book for this particular game, for this general area, right? But what you're actually getting to some degree is a campaign that you play. It presents a campaign outline in which the player heroes are agents of Saruman. It begins around 2965 and climaxes around the year 3000 of the Third Age, when Saruman finally dares to look into the Palantir of Orthanc. So it's sort of like it's a campaign that takes place during Saruman's, you know, curiosity with the dark side to the tipping point, which I think is a really interesting idea. It's also very locked in to the books. You know what I'm saying? It's not trying to give you the tools to role play in the general Isengard area. It's an opportunity to tell like a really specific book-centric kind of tale and explore the themes that are probably going to be the types of themes you might explore in the book, because it's going after that specific thing. It's going to say like, hey, we're going to hone you in a little bit because this game is something specific. And to me, that sort of illustrates, you know, what the designer said, like, hey, this is about Lord of the Rings. It's not about Middle Earth. So I this sort of helped sort of clarify that a little bit. And then when I saw it, I was like, yeah, you know what, let's, you know, I know I talk about these things, you know, in different parts of the videos, but let's make a Middle Earth RPGing Bookhouse Boys. Again, it's going to be a long one because there's still the other part that we're going to go into, which will cover like other options and different things like that. So, you know, it says here, like, you know, while this campaign can be used only this 4 rules, it might help to have Ruins of the Lost Realm, which I have. I'll show that in a little bit, but yeah. So, you know, it's a big campaign. And what I found in the adventures that I've flipped through in this, they're pretty good. You know, the starting adventure in The One Ring involves like I think maybe Dwarven ruins or something. But it sort of checks a lot of the boxes. Like you're exploring ruins, you encounter some weird stuff. It culminates in like a council session where you have to convince dwarves to do something. So like it does a good job like capturing all the nuances. And so not that I've looked at that cover to cover, but I would bet that it kind of does the same thing. Tales from the Lone Lands I grabbed because again, I think it's good to have a collection of adventures ready to go, because especially like in Middle Earth, where like I've said, I find the setting intimidating. I am not going to be able to come up with my own stories if I'm trying to think of something that's true to the material. But I sort of, in the second part of my solo adventures, I pulled a little bit from this adventure here. I wanted to specifically not just play adventures from the book in solo mode, but I did use some of the flavor from this adventure to power, so to speak, to fuel what I was doing. So that's, a collection of adventures. Realms of the Three Rings are going to cover elven folk. It does some of what MERP does. It gives you some history and stuff like that, but it's very much a modern vibe where it's a lot more approachable. It's a lot more, I don't want to say superficial, but it's not so encyclopedic. It's just, it's an approachability that I could say MERP doesn't have, but what MERP, it makes up for it in detail and a wealth of information. But this is like a source book. This tells you a bunch of shit about the elves, where they live, stuff like that. And it's going to have like the heavy hitters, right? It's not going to tell you like the shop owner on 3rd Street, but it is going to have, because again, it's a little bit of, Celeborn. It's the big places, the big hitters, because it's the fiction of the book. So it's going to try and cover all of that. So, Anyway, so there's probably some stuff going on back here, some adventures. Maybe it's an elvish campaign. And again, if the campaign isn't meant to be just a story you can run through in Middle Earth, it's meant to be, hey, this is for a group of elves doing elf shit. And there you go. Ruins of the Lost Realm is another source book. I will say, so here's Tharbad. I guess it's, again, I don't know why, I don't remember Tharbad from anything, but it seems to have a lot of presence. It seems like a big city. I will say, like, as much as I love the art in MERP, I genuinely think Free League's art is beautiful. I don't know. To me, like, it's very evocative of Lord of the Rings. I feel it does a really good job capturing that vibe. But yeah, it's got some adventures going on, which is nice. But yeah, I was happy to get this because I wanted a source book. And once I saw it covered Tharbad, I was like, yeah, man, even though I don't know why I'm so fascinated by Tharbad, well, I've explained it because it sort of opened up this idea that there was a seedy underbelly. As somebody who's recording in my basement, seedy underbellies are my jam. Moria was an interesting book because, again, it's hard to tell. It's one of the thicker books. It's basically as thick as the rule book. So I was happy to see that because it's like, Moria's a big place. And I was kind of curious, like, are they going to just do a brief overview or are they going to really go into it? And I feel like at the end of the day, they kind of really go into it. I wonder if you took MERP's Moria and filled it with like big fonts and double columns instead of triple columns and tons of art, like, would it be 200 and something pages? Like the way this is 200 something pages? What I will say is what's interesting about this though, is this game, if I remember correctly, has a campaign in it, but I think the campaign, I don't know if it was deliberately like specifically made to be a solo campaign or if it's just got an option to play it solo. So I thought that was really cool that it had a, put a little bit of a focus on, solo play. Here we go. Solo play in Moria 189. And again, because, this is more about telling the stories of Lord of the Rings than Middle Earth, you're meant, again, this is like, you're a party of dwarves, 189, I think it said, right? They sort of set it up that you're supposed to be, reclaiming Khazad-dûm. You're going to be joining Balin's quest. And again, this is one of those things where like, oh my God, like, if, like, I genuinely, and this is something I said a million times in my One Ring playthroughs, for some reason, I just have real trouble with like, hey, you're just getting started and your wingman is awesome. Awesome McFly, and you're just like, why is Gandalf like talking to me? Like, why does it have to be Balin's quest, right? Like, why do I have to be like Luke Skywalker's, co-pilot, in a Star Wars adventure or something like that, right? Like, why does it always have to have the big hitters coming back? But I really like the idea that they two things. They make a focus on solo play that's, it's pretty in depth, and that it also introduces, I think, the idea of your band. So I think the idea is that something I'm doing in the Hostile solo game, like I like the idea that you're not just playing a single character, you're playing the whole crew, and that's a little bit of what's going on here. So I thought that was kind of cool. I don't have any interest in playing a dwarf in Balin's party, but maybe someday I'll either hold my nose up and just do it, or I'll tweak it and take that out. I will say, like, if you didn't watch any of the One Ring playthrough, I get it. I chose Aragorn's mom as my patron because it was the only one I could, like, I don't want Tom Bombadil, and there's no way I'm talking to Gandalf. Like, it's just, like I said, he doesn't have a middle management email job in Middle Earth. He's got other things to do. So anyway, so I think for what little it's worth, I feel like that's, that's a brief overview of what were my two options playing RPGs in Middle Earth. We're getting to the end of part one. There are other options. We'll go over those a little bit in part two. But I feel like both of these really captured something for me. If I were going to go back, I would only ever play, like, if I was going to get the band back together, like, I would love to play MERP again. I don't know if it would be the most fun thing in the world, but the nostalgia would help me overcome a lot of whatever might be going on that wasn't that interesting. VTTs would also help do the trick. And again, that's something I'll get into a little bit in part two. The One Ring, I've had a lot of trouble getting people to want to play this. My first time in this game went very poorly. I ran it for a group that fizzled out eventually. It was my fault because of scheduling. But what I gathered from, and the recordings of the One Ring are over on the Alcoholic Adventure Cabal. And I think it was pretty clear that the players weren't loving the system, but I thought they were getting some enjoyment from the story. All right, so welcome back to part two. I did the whole thing like, I feel like the basement setup sort of where it needs to be. I wasn't able to sort of transition smoothly from part one to part two because my Rode Streamer X kind of just died about a minute before the end of what I was saying, so it was lost. So, I did the whole video about audio stuff, and I bitched about Rode, and I sort of taken it back a little bit. I'm using a Rode products here, and I finally come around on them, and I'm like, the Streamer X is great because it lets me mirror the settings I have here down there, so I know it's going to be basically almost exactly the same. And then the thing just died about an hour in. So I got to never use that again. So part 2 is going to get into some other things. Part 1, obviously, we talked about, the 2 main Middle Earth role-playing games that I have played, which was, of course, Middle Earth Role-Playing by Iron Crown Enterprises and the One Ring from Free League. But those aren't the only 2 options. Those are basically the 2 options I've played. Those aren't the only 2 options I've looked at. So I wanted to get into some of the other options available if those 2 aren't your jam. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about is Against the Darkmaster. Now, Against the Darkmaster is an RPG. I can bring it up right here. Against the Darkmaster is an RPG that is basically trying to be Rolemaster brought into the modern age. You can almost, if you look at, maybe not even Rolemaster in the maybe it's almost supposed to be like Middle Earth role-playing with the full cruft of a lore master kind of thing. But you can tell, like, right from the cover here, it's got like the Dark Tower in the background, and you've got like the classic fellowship made of, an elf, a dwarf, a halfling, the Gandalf kind of character, and the Aragorn kind of character. And, it's very much, it says the classic game of fantasy adventure. It's very much trying to capture the feel of Middle Earth role-playing, those kinds of games. And it's huge. The book itself, I don't know if I still have the hardcover. The hardcover book is like 700 pages. But, if you go to like creating a character, you can see it's like generate your stats, which is very much what you would do in Middle Earth role-playing, distribute 50 points, for whatever reason, call it what you will. Then you choose your kin. Now the kin are dwarf, halfling, man, wild folk, but then there's like high man, which you could maybe is like the northern, like the Aragorn kind of guys. There's half elf, dusk elf. There's 3 different types of elves that you could probably sort of correlate to the Middle Earth equivalents. And then they give you orcs, half orcs. Middle Earth role-playing gives you the options for orcs, half orcs. And usually they're like, these kind of characters are almost never played by PCs, but they're there. And then it goes very much into similar things where you're dealing like with +5 of this, plus, and then I'm going to see if they have a character sheet in the back here, but they might not, but it ends up being very much the same. And then, of course, this is what I think the second edition of MERP has. It has like a collection of tables in the back, but you can very much see it's very similar. Like, I confess it's been a while, so I don't remember what NALA. I don't remember what but you can see it. You're rolling D100s. You're adding things up. You're trying to get to what is your total equal, and that gives you like 13 damage plus some kind of critical MOD. That sort of thing. Tons and tons of tables, which is what, if you're playing this kind of game, that's what you want, right? So Against the Darkmaster, and again, these are going to be much more of like a quicker overview because I just want to make you aware of what other options are out there. I don't necessarily have much experience of any playing in these games, but you have like, the classes here. Let's go to vocations, which might be what they call them in Middle Earth role-playing. You got a warrior, rogue, the wizard, an animist. Again, basically what you had before. Now they add a couple. Champion might have an equivalent. Dabbler might not. That might be something else. But maybe it is like almost a 1-to-1 equivalent if you go through the pages. But yeah, you get like skill ranks, again, all this stuff from MERP. It's going to be a very crunchy system. It's a lot. Like even, the reason why I don't think I have the hardcover book anymore is because in my mind there was just no point. Everything I run, I never run RPGs at the table. And like if I have like a book on my nightstand, like, oh, what's an RPG book I can sort of thumb through. The book is so big and cumbersome that I ended up just looking at it on my iPad and going from there. So Yeah, so Against the Darkmaster. Now, the good thing about Against the Darkmaster, that this section is going to be, this part's going to be all over the place. Against the Darkmaster has a Foundry module. Is this, maybe it's this one. Now, I think as I was saying before, the Foundry module is losing support. I think it stopped support at version 12. Foundry's on version 14. So there's like two, maybe they got it to work with 13. I don't know. But my understanding from the Discord is that it is not going to be supported anymore. Maybe somebody else will pick up the mantle. I don't know the latest. But at the time that I backed Against the Darkmaster, I was aware of the Foundry support. It was supposed to be pretty good. And I was like, oh, okay. You know, I'm always thinking in terms of like online support. And I was like, okay, this might be a way to bring back the MERP magic. And so, yeah, I was like, let me grab it. You know, let me take a look. And then like they stopped supporting it. So unfortunately, that's not going to be any. It's an option, and it's probably a very good option. I think people like Against the Darkmaster. And, you know, there's even like if you want, you can buy a campaign that's something like Golden Throne. So they've got like a lot of material out there. They've got a lot of support for it. They just, and maybe like on Roll20 or something like that, it's, you know, they've got to, you know, because all you need there is the character sheet, right? But here, you know, they bruise, like it's very well supported here. But the problem with, you know, set movement rates, which movement rates is a thing in MERP that you got to track. But the problem with Foundry is always, you know, these are usually volunteer efforts. And, you know, my understanding is when a version jumps a whole number, like a 12 to a 13 to a 14, especially with like maybe since 10 or 11, there's a lot of things that get broken. And I get it that they need to, like, hey, look, you know, there's something underlying here. There's no reason for us to keep this legacy if it's not going to work well. Let's, you know, pull off the Band-Aid now. You know, you got the tables. I don't know if there's a way to, well, it doesn't matter. But is there a critical role? Yeah, I was kind of curious. Just drag it in and see if it works. Oh, you guys select tokens. Okay. Anyway, but you can see, like, you know, there's a lot of, and there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of skills in particular. One thing I look for in these types of VTTs supported games is what can you make? What are you allowed to create? Container, defense, you know, armor, equipment, hit location, melee attack. The more stuff like this, the more moddable it is, and the more I'm a fan. So when you can do like hit locations, that means you can create your own monsters more easily. If you can create a primary attribute, if you can create, you know, that starts to open up the stuff wide open. Traits, like as long as if you can add like a skill and things like that, then you can start turning your games into just about anything you want. And I really appreciate that. And this game, this Against the Darkmaster, is built on, there's some framework, and I'm never going to remember. It's like an acronym like GCH. I don't know what it is, but it's basically like a way, it's a type of character sheet, or, well, and it often has this breakdown, skills, combat. Like you have these buttons that take you through tabs, and you start getting, like this might be like the real grit of the character sheet. So if you can know what's going on here, you can really go nuts. Now, I remember, I think back in the old days, I thought there used to be like an edit page and then a play page. You had to like lock between the two, but maybe that's not the case anymore. Anyway, you can sort of see if you go into admin, you know, what it's referencing. Anyway, so Against the Darkmaster is a good option. It's easy to get the material, especially in PDF form. You can, I think, very easily bring over whatever MERP stuff you have almost directly, because it's very much meant to be that game, just sort of maybe brought up a little bit to a few modern standards while not getting rid of too much at all. So again, Against the Darkmaster is a good option. It's a big game and it's going to give you everything you need. But it is losing Foundry support. So unfortunately that's a downside. So, but again, Against the Darkmaster, I'll try and have links through all this. Now, another option that I've heard is good is Dungeon World. Now, I don't have a PDF of Dungeon World, but I do have this PDF of Fellowship, which I feel like is like an offshoot of Dungeon World. Dungeon World is a PbTA D&D clone, essentially. It's basically trying to take the ideas of Dungeons and Dragons and bring it to like a PbTA style. Now, I know like one of the folks on our Discord, I think, ran a Dungeon World specific Middle Earth game and said it worked great, which it doesn't surprise me. It's probably going to be high magic, but I don't know how, with Dungeon World, how much you're like, let's change this or change, like, I don't know how much flexibility there is in like, hey, let's not have any magic casters. But for the function of it, my understanding is, from his experience, that it worked really well. Now, Fellowship is a PbTA thing, which is very much, you can sort of see from the art, it's very much not trying to be Middle Earth, but I think it does try to focus on having a party and what that means, like the interactions of the party and stuff like that. So I genuinely don't know much about this. I know a little bit more about Dungeon World, and I have to confess that if I were going to go that route, I would probably skip this and just go with Dungeon World straight up. And, MERP's going to have fireballs in it, so just roll with it. It just let it be what it's going to be, and have fun. It doesn't matter if everybody's like, there's 3 Gandalfs running around. Like, if that's what your players want to play, I guess in the end, just let them play that. But yeah, so I'll we're not going to talk too much about this, but yeah, there's basically Dungeon World. There are like PbTA options, Fellowship, if that's what you're looking for. So now, one that I don't have a ton of familiarity with, but I did go down like the rabbit hole a little bit, is GURPS. Now, GURPS, I wonder, I'm going to have to, let me jot a note down. I thought actual play of GURPS MERP. I'll see if I can find it and see if I remember that. And if it's out there, there's one group of guys, and I'll try and link to their stuff, that basically does GURPS for everything. And so I thought Lord of the Rings was one of the things they did. And I'll see if I can find it. But even if not, like if you're into GURPS, I've seen them do like GURPS Star Trek, I think, GURPS Warhammer. But the idea, like GURPS obviously is meant to be a generic system and you can do anything you want with it. So I think over on the Alcoholic Adventure Cabal, they were running, they don't have any like video, but there is audio. They were running the Rudar? Man, my memory is such a sieve. I was listening to a whole bunch of it, but they were running that in GURPS. So it's definitely been done. And yeah, again, Alcoholic Adventure Cabal, there's a whole bunch of adventures where they use GURPS to run a MERP module. The thing that I enjoyed about that I enjoyed about GURPS, I was like, yeah, well, like what I did was I was like, is there actually like an official one though? Like, did somebody already start doing the conversion? And what was great was what I encountered were lengthy forum threads of, someone like sort of putting it out there like, hey, I'm thinking of running MERPs and I'm thinking of using GURPS for it. What do you guys think? And in my mind, this is the most GURPS GURPS stuff. Like immediately there's like this massive thread of just debate, like not like in a bad way, but just like all the just endless discussions of the things you need to incorporate or not incorporate, or how you want to bring this from that module, or how no, you absolutely don't want to include that, or this kind of magic from the thaumaturgy book is actually almost right, but not quite right. And it just made you realize how, in my mind, I think when people who love GURPS as a DM show why they love GURPS, that's why. I feel like how you set up GURPS is almost as much playing the game for the GM as running the game. So it was really nice and I was having a fun time, like watching like the debate unfold and just the minutia and just the impossible set of options that you could mix and match to put things together. But yeah, no, GURPS is absolutely an option. You would need to put the work in, but yeah, it's been done. Definitely. Now let me see what this is. I'm going to bring up Legends of Middle Earth. Is a very small game. It's only 25 pages. And let me bring it up to the top. This is just a PDF. I think it's freely available. I'll have to double check, but you know, it's not hard to get. Now, what is Legends of Middle Earth? It's a role-playing game set in the world of The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, The Silmarillion, and other works of Professor Tolkien. This is just a 25-page rule set that just gives you the basics of what you need to run other stuff. It says here, it's not gonna have any resources as far as the game setting goes or adventures. But it's just a very light. It can almost be like my first RPG. It's a really simple, light rule set. You got your list of skills: acrobatics, alertness, archery, athletics, melee, riding. So it's not that different than a MERP style kind of game. But the basic idea is that you have the way skill checks work is you're trying to get underneath a target number. The target number might be like your skill, right? So say like you have yeah, like there's a bunch of things that are going to come together that you're going to add up, like abilities and modifiers and skills, and then you roll dice. So here's the example, like an elven scholar with a spell skill of 13 is attempting to guess the word. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get underneath the skill. The difficulty is how many dice you roll to try and get under it. So if it's a simple task, you're going to use one die. So there's, I don't know if it's D10, it's 6-sided. So there's no way you're going to fail, right, when you have a skill of 13. Now, if you get 2 dice, you're still not going to fail because you can't roll a 13 or higher. But once you get to 3 dice, there's a chance you might roll over. If it's like an impossible task, you're going to roll 6 dice and try to get under the 13, right? So the difficulty, so like you set the difficulty by saying how many dice you're going to roll. And, you're trying to get under or equal to or under. So as you can see, it's very straightforward, very, very fast. It's not meant to be a super crunchy system. I think I wanted to get to the character sheet. Story tokens is probably just like, hero points and basic stuff like that. Passions probably give you like little bonuses that you can use a couple times in adventure. But again, very simple, very straightforward. And if you're looking for like a lightweight rule system to play Middle Earth material that feels like a pretty good thematic choice, I feel like Legends of Middle Earth is a really great option for something like PbTA is also going to be pretty light. But PbTA, in my mind, has baggage, which is, I don't know, it's not baggage. It's just, it has a lot of player input with narrative control, right? And if that's not what you're looking for, I feel like Legends of Middle Earth is a great lightweight option to give a shot to. All right, so yeah. Now we're going to start getting into ones I'm a little more familiar with. Savage Worlds. Savage Worlds, again, one of our friends on the Discord describes it as GURPS 5.0, and I get where he's coming from. For my money, Savage Worlds, when I pick up Savage Worlds, I look at it and like start doing what I was sort of having fun with the GURPS forum threads, right? It's not quite as much of an exercise. There's less to pick and choose from, but it is still that process of like, okay, maybe I can pull something from the fantasy book, but there's also the Pathfinder rule books. Maybe I can pull something from there, and you start trying to mix and match mechanics. So Savage Worlds absolutely can give you a Middle Earth role-playing game. You can make it low magic if you want by just making the choice to pull that material out. You could choose certain hindrances and perks and things like that to sort of shape the game in the way you want it to go, in a way that's going to be easier and quicker than GURPS, but with less detail. But if you don't want to do that, some people have already done the work. And so there's the Savage Middle Earth Player's Guide, and then there's also, let me see if I have it here. And then there's also the Savage Middle Earth Game Master's Guide. So, yeah, so this is just, it's at version 0.9. I don't know if it ever hit 1.0. This is the last one I could find, but you've got the free people, you got dwarf, elf, different kinds, Cinda, Sylvan, Nodal. So like they've done the work here. You got languages, you got, sort of shaping, traits to the players. You got edges and hindrances. They sort of, again, pulling from a lot of what's already in the book. But the other thing they do, though, and I don't know where it's listed, at some place they say like, hey, a good thing to have, maybe it's in the DM guide. A good thing to have is, so they even say like, if, when I was saying like you're pulling from different materials and things like that, alternative magic systems, they give you like suggestions of how you might want to do it. Like if on the other hand, you're looking for a more subtle form of magic and one less open to players, there's a solution available, the Hall of Fire magazine, issue 25. So this is the thing, like it's putting stuff out there. But you have to track it down. At some point, they got the Creatures of Middle Earth bat. At some point they're talking about, hey, you should pull some edges and traits or whatever from Wizards and Warriors. Wizards and Warriors, I was able to download online. I think they still have it out there, pretty easy to get. And, they're not saying take all of them. They're saying like, pick and choose a few of these. It's just a few pages here. It's like 8 pages of some stuff that you might want to incorporate just in case. But one of them, I can't remember what it was. I couldn't find when I was trying to piece it together. So, you have to sort of make do, right? But the point is that, yeah, somebody has done a lot of the work. They built out like some of the stat blocks and things like that. And so if you're, and I know Savage Worlds has the reputation of being like a pulpy action game. And in my heart, I keep believing that if you wanted to do more subtle types of gameplay and storytelling, you can. I just don't know if I've ever had the chance to test that theory. But yeah, so the work has been done. If you wanted to just jump in and play some Middle Earth material with Savage Worlds, grabbing the Savage Worlds Savage Middle Earth Player's Guide and DM's Guide would basically take care of it. And then, you could start shaping it as you want from there, but it absolutely would get you started and you'd be off and running. So, and as a huge fan, I think everyone here on the channel is a huge fan of Savage Worlds. So I feel like if I were going to push Middle Earth on the other guys, those poor bastards, as much as I might want to do it with One Ring, if I had any consideration for their feelings, which as a sociopath, I often don't, but I might go with something like this just to make it a little bit more fun, a little bit more palatable. Because I think doing like a MERP kind of heavy thing might just be like, oh my God, it's a lot of D100 crunch. And that's, might not be fun for like they would put up with it for like something short, but I wouldn't want to run like a 5-year campaign with that. They'd be like, please kill me. which is always what makes me a little nervous. Like, I feel like Warhammer 4th edition should hit this channel at some point, but Warhammer 4th edition is a lot, and I get a little nervous about that. But anyway, so yeah, Savage Worlds, absolutely an option. I think it would be a very good option. If it were me personally, I might choose it over GURPS just because this is already out there, and I find it manageable to sort of homebrew and shape and customize, where GURPS feels like a lot. So there you go, Savage Worlds. So now we're going to start getting into what's the other one? Harn, I think, is a great game. I think it's a great core system. I think it is more flexible than it gets credit for, potentially. I think it could be a fantastic base for a MERP style game. And because at least the Columbia Games version is sold in such a modular fashion, you know, when you get the core HarnMaster book, it doesn't come with, does it come with magic at all? Let's go to is there a table of contents? Of course not. But I know there's a whole separate book for religion. There's a whole separate book for magic. And so when you get those two things, you know, you can leave them out. You can keep them. You can do whatever. Let's do book view. And I'm just not sure why sometimes. I think maybe it's part of the PDF. You have to get that table of contents. But yeah, I mean, it's got a lot of great things going for it. You know, it's crunchy without being brutal. It's a D100 system, so it keeps the flavor. And the one thing I think that it doesn't get enough credit for, I mean, the combat I think is really bloody and brutal, but without being incredibly slow. But it's got a lot of good things. It does have psionics, boo. I'd probably never use those, but it has really good campaign stuff. I'm a big fan of like its weather tracking. I'm a big fan of like random events, you know, because I feel like these are broad enough that it could be anything. Like, you know, it's a spring, your random event, like for the season is you have a poor harvest, you know, and then so how does that start to influence the area that you're traveling in, right? It's, you know, it's got a lot of rules for long range travel. And it's not, you know, it's not done in the way the One Ring is, where it makes it into sort of like this narrative engine, but it's got a lot of detail that I think could help spark some of that when you combine it with the random encounter tables. And again, they got highway encounters, whether it's a lawful, like a, you know, the One Ring had the different types of areas. Is it lawful or lawless? Is it day or is it night? And it's a lot, but it's a lot. So I feel like it could keep things interesting without, that's the one thing it's not the one thing, but a lot of times in like the Free League games, they're oracles, and oracles in general, you know, when they have like 6 options, you know, you're going to burn through those pretty quickly, I feel like, and start hitting repeats. And like the One Ring, there might be 12 in there. Well, you know, but, so my fear is always like if you were going to do like a really long-term game, would the options start to like, oh, hit another one. I remember we were doing a Forbidden Lands campaign that lasted a really long time, and it was a lot of fun. But I remember the GM being like, nope, we've already done that one. But I've never looked at the tables for Forbidden Lands because I didn't want anything to be spoiled at the time. But my hope is that they were a lot of them, so that, you know, but at the same time, there weren't so many that he wasn't getting repeats, right? So, Yeah, that's the thing. But I do feel like there's a lot of options going on here. But yeah, so Harn, I feel like could be a really great option. And the good news is that people have done some of the work. So again, I'll try and find links to this. This is a MERP Harn conversion I found online. It says the use of HarnMaster rules in Middle Earth is likely to cause problems for some Middle Earth fundamentalists. People take a view that Middle Earth that is governed by what is written in Tolkien's books and refuse to allow anything. Anyway, so this makes certain assumptions. The point is original MERP. As close as possible, these rules build on what came from MERP, which again is not the One Ring, it's the first edition rules. Same races, same builds, blah, blah, blah. So it's probably going to have similar problems, like it might be too... it might be too magic-y, but what it does is it does do, like part of character creation in Harn is like determining what month you're born, and that gives you little perks and bonuses. So it takes a lot of what is in like the HarnMaster process and, just tries to adapt it into Middle Earth. So again, like if the point is to have a place to get started, this will do it for you. You can have like different cultures. What I'm trying to find though is what it does for, here we go. The occupation list. This is something actually I'm not a huge fan of in some of these games. Like, like, do you want to roll up a jeweler in Middle Earth? Do you want to roll up a jeweler ever? Like, so that's part of the issue. What I like about if you were to really homebrew it, and what I was working on, maybe I'll see if I can highlight this a little bit, was trying to find the classes of MERP, or as you saw in like Against the Darkmaster, and make those the options and take out all the rest, let the characters choose. Really focus, really focus what's going on into, let me see if this is going to come up over here. Okay. Really focus what's going on into the more classic tropes so that you can do a more classic MERP game. Because I feel like when you start getting into like being a moneylender or a sculptor, you're going to lose the thread. And I know like there's probably ways to do it, but I genuinely feel like you're just going to jam up, especially like newer players. You're just going to jam them up, and it's not going to get you where you want to go. It's going to, it's being faithful to Harn at the expense of maybe being faithful to MERP in this case. And so when I was trying to adapt Harn, I genuinely jettisoned and was happy to do it. I was, what I meant to say is I was genuinely happy to jettison jettison quite a lot, because I don't feel like it's doing anybody any favors. So yeah, the other thing is though, let me just really quickly grab one other thing that I forgot. And then let me show you, because there's two things. There's been two efforts to adapt this. Let me get the other one. So there was that. There was also something called Midgard. I think there was a third one though. I thought I was looking at something else. Let me just make sure. So Midgard is like a really old school, and maybe this conversion borrows a lot from this. But yeah, just dot matrix ass printing of some basic stuff. Again, 21 pages. View book mode control 8. I should remember that. But again, I'll try and like, it's gonna be such a whirlwind trying to record all this stuff and get it up. Things are so nuts right now. I apologize, but yeah, things are so nuts. I'm trying to find out, but there was one other thing here that I wanted to. That's not it. I thought there was one other. basically, I thought there was one other PDF I could show, and I just don't know if I have it. Again, that's half the problem, right? Like, I just don't know if I have it. Legends of Middle Earth. Anyway, but yeah, as you can see, so if you want to do HarnMaster, I think actually this is a really good option. And you can start from this and, go from there. Yeah. So anyway, so next up, did I do that? Next up, I'm going to show is some Mythras. Now, Mythras is going to be very similar in spirit to Harn, where it's a D100. It's very flexible. This is sort of like a generic-y D100 system. It would be easier to do it in Mythras than it would be to do it in Harn. And the nice thing is that while you have magic, and you have folk magic, animism. So this is the thing. You have folk magic, animism, mysticism, sorcery, theism. You could pick and choose, like, maybe like Sauron is more sorcery. And so it can be in the world, but you keep it from your players, right? It's very easy to do that. Which I think is part of the strength maybe of something like a Savage Worlds, and, I'm sure GURPS too. But in Savage Worlds, you could like pick and choose it. And then this would be like that less pulpy actiony, if that's, not what you're going for. Mythras can be a lot more gritty, a lot more very deadly. And if you want like folk magic to be a little like, oh, I make a little sparkle, like, Gandalf's fireworks kind of stuff, so you can really shape how it works. Yeah, it's a really, Mythras, I think, is one of the most underrated generic systems out there. I used it to run a Cold War spy game. It's really flexible. Now, the one thing you could do, again, if you didn't want it to be quite so nuanced in that sense, and if you wanted to get some more of the vibe of MERP, which had like, a magic caster, fireballs, you could get like classic fantasy, which is it's its own thing. You don't need Mythras if you go with classic fantasy, but basically classic fantasy is trying to bring, that D&D to Mythras, right? And so it has, much more classic spells. It's going to have like your fireball, it's going to have your magic missile. It's going to have classes that are a little more typical, like bard, cleric, druid, fighter, ranger, so it's gonna be that kind of thing. And it's gonna, if you wanted to make and I feel like I don't know if this is as moddable as Mythras is. I feel like this is meant to be taken a little more whole cloth, so that might be an issue. But yeah, otherwise, like, it could be humans. I think it's not a bad choice. I think maybe Mythras might be, if you're really trying to hone in on MERP specifically, I might go with Mythras and sort of bang it into shape. But I always feel like there's a lot of really good stuff with classic fantasy that should not be overlooked. But so yeah, and I think with that, the last one I think I'll point out, and again, I don't mean for this to be, this is not like an exhaustive list. I'm sure there's a million other options out there. In fact, I think I know there is one that used to be for sale maybe after MERP fell apart, but before the first edition. I mean, you could get the first edition of One Ring if I'd probably go with the second, but the advantage, I don't know if it's the advantage. The nice thing about the One Ring's first edition is it does have a lot of like source books. It might have more source books available like in PDFs than are currently available for the second edition. But anyway, but along those lines, I think the other thing you could do is Adventures in Middle Earth from Free League. So what Adventures in Middle Earth is, it's the One Ring converted to 5e. Now, many people have very strong opinions about 5e one way or the other. On the channel here, we all, we're all like, yeah, it's cool, but it's not the thing that we're jumping to play right off the bat. But what I've heard people say is that this might be the better version of the One Ring. Like I was saying, like in the first part of this, the One Ring has like sort of like all these mechanics. Like I'm moving the arm of my chair. Apologies. Has all these mechanics that are a little, like it's a target number of 20, but then you subtract that, but maybe should you make it an 18? And, this sort of takes that unfamiliar stuff and makes it extremely familiar. And I think while I don't think it's just like D&D with Gandalf. I think, as you can see here, like the Shadow, the Fellowship phase, Journeys, they manage to bring over, I think, all the important good flavor from the One Ring and put it into a system that is much more familiar and much more approachable. And I don't necessarily think it needs to lose much. Now it's not going to be like a 1-for-1, but they do, they got the different types of terrain, hard, severe, so they do incorporate a lot of, like turning the journey into like a narrative engine, determining the difficulty of the task, of the journey, how long is the journey. It's going to determine how many challenges you face. So it's sort of, you have the hunt. Again, it's got a lot of the stuff that the One Ring does right, and it brings it over into IV and makes it maybe a little smoother, maybe a little more approachable, a little more familiar. So you're not tripping over, like again, for me, part of my part of my difficulty with the One Ring was getting used to it. And I feel like this might help smooth that out. Now, there's a player's guide. There's, like in Classic, what you would expect, there's a Loremaster guide. If I can bring that up. And, it's going to, the adventuring phase, again, just like the One Ring, it's got the adventuring phase. It's, talks about expanding journeys and how to, anyway, it's, now here's the interesting thing, magic in Middle Earth. The One Ring, there is no magic, basically. I've never played this, so I'd be kind of curious to see it, but it seems like it's options for adding magic, which lets me feel like they are trying to make it low magic, much like One Ring Classic. So here's like a list of appropriate spells, right? So, and even this feels like a lot. But yeah, anyway, so I feel like this, if I were to recommend one way to go to all the filthy masses, I would probably recommend this. It's very available. Free League sells it. Basically, anything you buy for the One Ring second edition, you can buy for this. I'll show you what I have here. Bree, Erebor, Eriador, Lonely Mountains, Mirkwood, Ravanian, Rivendell. So all these things, these are all books that you can buy. And it may even have a little bit more because it never went through like a first edition, then a second edition. So like they've just been able to add to it, I think. So like, let's see, like the Lonely Mountain Region Guide. Visit the city of Dale, discover the kingdoms under the mountain. So again, like it's going to have like very similar presentation and approach to the world that the One Ring does. So again, like this might be easiest way to go because there's tons of pre-made material. There's tons of pre-made adventures. Foundry support's probably solid because it's D&D. I don't know how flexible, or maybe somebody made their own. I don't really know, but I'm sure like it's probably pretty easy to play online because it's, 5e at its heart. So again, yeah, this might be the way I would go if I were saying like, hey, you're just dipping your toes in this. I would definitely not recommend MERP because like I was saying, it's going to be very expensive. Because you cannot buy the PDFs and tracking down the stuff. Oh, you know what? Something I did want to show real quickly. MERP to BFRPG. Now, this is somebody doing like the basic conversion from MERP to Mythras. And BFRPG. Yeah, anyway, so there is some, I'm never going to remember any of this stuff, but I think this is trying, what BFRPG, basic fantasy, I think what it's trying to, it's what the classic D100 system is that like Cthulhu's based on, and I can picture, I don't know if I still have it, but I can picture it. Just Googling it really quickly, just in case it comes up easily. BRP is what I'm, basic role playing. That's why the F was thrown. But basic role playing is like one of the original old school D100. So I feel like that's what this is, basically converting MERP to BRP. And BRP you can still buy. I don't know if it's Chaosium, but you can still buy basic role playing. But anyway. So yeah, getting off track. I think if I were to recommend getting started, like I really want to play in Middle Earth, I would go for the 5e. The 5e Adventures in Middle Earth. I think that would be my recommendation if you were looking to go all in. If you're looking to dip your toe into something, oh man, I think I might lean toward the Legends of Middle Earth. If I can, I don't know if I still have it up here, or if I was closing things out for some reason. I think, if you can get your hands on, or if you have some stories you want to tell, I think I would grab this and just go for it. And, because it's a really easy way to get started. And, if you're a sicko like me that really wants to homebrew, I would look at Savage Worlds. You sit there and be like, oh, but it's going to be like a more actiony game. But there's a lot of action in, the Lord of the Rings stories. So it's not like the worst way to go. And it's a pretty smooth playing generic system. But yeah, if you really want to get into the filth, my choice was going to be Harn or maybe Mythras, but I was really wanting Harn to work. But yeah, Adventures in Middle Earth, I think is the way I would go. Just for because it's going to do everything great. 5e is a solid system. Yeah. So real quickly before we go on and wrap this up, let's get into virtual tabletops. Now, I was saying, as much as I was saying about like against the Darkmaster and this and that, once you start incorporating VTTs, things then start to change. Like I was saying, against the Darkmaster is going to lose support. It already has lost support, I think, after version 12. So it's kind of a non-starter in some ways if you're not looking to like find old versions, roll back, things like that. Let me see. But ironically, what's gotten a lot of support recently is Rolemaster. Rolemaster, for a while, you could get on Fantasy Grounds and it had like a Rolemaster module that you can buy that I did buy and I thought it looked like shit. Like, I don't know if it was getting support for a while and I didn't think it worked very well. But then all of a sudden on Foundry, they started selling Rolemaster and it's like fully supported up to, it's very current, is fully supported. You can go buy it on on Drive-Thru RPG or maybe the new Foundry store. You can buy Core Law, Creature Law, Spell Law, Treasure Law, and you get the book. It's not the book, but you get the text. You get tables, which is what we're all here for, right? Yeah, will it draw a result? It might not because it's in the compendium. But if you open up a character sheet, it'll walk you through character creation. You can roll your stats. And there you go. You got like all your business going on. You can go to the next step. Like, so it's when I was saying before, like Rolemaster is like, Jesus, it's a lot of game and it's a lot of work. Once you bring it into a VTT, that changes. You got your checklist of things you need to do. And so it makes it very possible to actually just bring your Middle Earth role-playing modules into Foundry because this is such a good implementation. You want to like roll a, you got to have a token. So again, that's often a thing. Let's bring a token out. It's going to be huge. There we go. But, now so we select a token and then you want to roll. You can do all your modifiers. Your target number is a 50 for, maybe, I don't know if you could change that because of the difficulty or because it's a resistance roll. It might be something specific, but so it rolls an 8, which almost triggered I think that would have triggered an open-ended roll. But anyway, the point is that, yeah, it's you have like a little, resting thing. It's a really good implementation, and it's very recent, and so I expect it to be well supported for at least a while. It's going to give you a bunch of basic stuff if you buy things. Again, I always look for items. What can I create? You can create cultures, equipment, professions, skills. That's a big one. So once you do that, you could literally make a 1-for-1 MERP conversion if you wanted. And yeah, like I was saying, like, treasure law, spell law, and again, it's a little modular, so you don't need to bring in too much spell law if you don't want to, right? Can you draw these, or is it not going to let you? Because those are maneuver tables. Let's see what happens if you bring a movement maneuver table in. So you know what I was saying, you got it 40% complete. What does that mean? I have no idea, right? But you can see like it. So again, like what once was a batshit crazy system becomes intensely manageable and might be, for those purists out there, might be the best option. And it's a very doable one. So yeah. Now there's other options here. Let me go back a bit. So like I said, I started playing around with Harn Middle Earth. This world got broken for some reason. I don't know why. Well, it's because I'm moving everything all over the place. But so I started doing, some work on Harn Middle Earth. And, the problem is that with older stuff, things get broken. But, the organization of the compendia get broken. So let's see, Harn Middle Earth. But, like I started bringing in a lot of items from MERP, I started bringing in traits like outnumbered. That actually, I don't know if I needed to bring that in, but maybe I did. Some of the weapons, from Middle Earth. Let's see if the character sheet involves, like different stuff, but I started in creating entries for like if you're an Eastern Sylvan, it would give you certain modifiers, which I don't know if they're showing up. There was corruption, which was something that, you can sort of create a trait. So you could sort of incorporate the idea of like the shadow being a problem, things like that. And the other thing that it does is Harn can be also like a pretty overwhelming system, but once you get it into Foundry, it becomes a lot easier. Now, the trick with Harn is if you want the Columbia Games support, Foundry support, I think that's also been discontinued. The guy who is doing the work on it is going to be focusing on the Celestia, whatever the other one is that came from HarnMaster Gold. And the other thing is you can't just search for it and have it show up, because I don't remember why he was doing this, but let me see if I can pop this up. He didn't want to list it on the Discord is called Heroic Lands. And I think what you would want to search for is Songs of the Heroic Lands. And then you have to enter the information directly into Foundry. It's not going to be part of the store where you can search for it and download it. And I think that was something to do with AI. I don't know all the details. I don't know all the specifics. I just know that he said he didn't want to list his stuff on the store. And so he was going to keep working on it, and it's going to have, updates and things like that. But it was going to be a little bit more work to get it going. And it's going to be doing the HarnMaster Gold version, which is crunchier in ways that I don't think really makes much of a difference. But let me show you, because things, like I was saying, things get broken between versions. Let me see if this will let me. So yeah, Rolemaster is very much an option. Harn Middle Earth. I'll just show you some of what I'd worked on, but because this is version 14, and this doesn't have support for it, a lot of things are going to break. Like, I don't think it'll open up the character sheet. But you can, like I said, my old world was broken for some reason, but you can start to see, I was bringing in some stuff, Middle Earth, Eriador. These are all items from the One Ring second edition. And then this is from, I've got Bree and the Barrow Downs. The character sheets won't open anymore. I don't know. So yeah, a lot of this is broken and not going to work, which was a little disappointing, but it wasn't surprising, so if I were to go back, I'd have to like rethink, what am I going to do? I would probably have to work in, I prefer Harn from Columbia Games, so I'd have to keep a version 12 around. Yeah. But then finally, let's end, by just going a little bit into the One Ring second edition's Foundry module, which is really fantastic. Again, the problem with the One Ring second edition is that the Tolkien estate, I think, sees VTTs as a video game, so nobody can get the license to sell material. But the things they can do is they can do a character sheet. The character sheet works very well. As you can see here, that's my skill of 5. Target number is 13 because it's in Strider mode. The target number is based on an 18 instead of a 20, just to make it a little easier. If you were to click, it's going to bring up like, are you weary? No. Are you miserable? No. Those, again, statuses that can affect you. You've got 2 skill points, but it's also one of your favorite skills, which means it's going to have like advantage, and then you could roll. It would let you spend points. It's a failure. So my target number was a 13 and I rolled an 11. So it's a failure, right? this 4 and a 3 was because it's favored. It took the highest one, and then I had 2 D6s, and it just didn't get it. But the system works really well. I think there are certain things available. Like this stuff, adversaries, these might be generic enough, or maybe did I enter it? I don't think I entered it. Maybe I did. But yeah, there's just like enough. Harn, why did I bring Harn in? But yeah, so there's, the core is there, and everything they can sort of work on, they do. They give you like hot bars that, simplify things. They give you these, fellowship tracker that helps, Gilrain the Fair is my patron. These are like, your eye awareness for the whole party. So it gives you everything you need to run it. It's a really well done module. It might have version 14 support. And if not, it's probably coming soon. But it is going to require you to do some real legwork. But if you're willing to do that legwork, like I definitely did not enter these weapons. So, this is the kind of stuff that it's not Tolkien Middle Earth specific, so it's okay for them, I guess, to provide it for you, or maybe somebody did. But yeah, I found this to be a really good module that made playing the One Ring Second Edition a blast. And it lets you do other things like, let me see. So like, I was able to bring in the map, and then I can use like a fog of war module to sort of not really know the difficulty of the terrain before I get there. So I sort of superimposed one map over another in order to, and then I can also, like, these are things I've encountered in my adventures. I just sort of mark them down. As a reminder of like, hey, there was something here. And, so it's stuff like that. So I found it, like, I would never journal my stuff, but I found that there's a lot of really useful tools available. And I think you could even, let me see something really quickly. Tiles, like tile browser. I'm going to cancel. I thought I had some tiles available. So that I could, like, put an overlay about like a journey and stuff like that. I thought I had that stuff, and I just don't know what I did with it. But anyway, so I knew I was going to spend some time here, so I was willing to put in the work. I grabbed a lot of stuff to have it ready for my adventures. I grabbed, some maps to have them ready. I used, Tom Kartos. I bought his pack. So anyway, so it's just like mechanics. This was definitely. Oh, this is, I bought the. When I said I like the Harn, weather, travel stuff, I do. Like, this is the weather information from Harn, to use it to generate weather patterns and stuff like that. But anyway, but the point is that the One Ring Second Edition module for Foundry is fantastic. And like the other games, it makes it very easy to run a system that might be a little bit of work. So anyway, long rambling, not that I'm an expert, not that I'm anything at all, but I wanted to give an overview of role-playing in Middle Earth because, again, it's sort of become a big part of this channel, for better or worse. And it's something that I'm always a little surprised by because I keep thinking to myself, but I'm not a huge fan. But I wanted to show just sort of like my exposure to the current state of, role-playing in Middle Earth. And hopefully there was something here that might be helpful, even though I know it's not in a format that is probably very useful. It's not like a PowerPoint slide where it's like efficient and bullet pointy. But yeah, so there you go. Again, like I was saying, my recommendations, if you're sort of just looking to get into the easiest way is probably the 5e adaptation. If you're looking to really get into it and shape it, I like Harn, but it's going to be frustrating to use with a virtual tabletop. So given that, I might go more with Savage Worlds or Mythras. Mythras, if you want to keep that D100 crunch. And the One Ring second edition is going to be very doable in a virtual tabletop. So as is Rolemaster, if you want to go with the OG. And that's been a pretty recent development. Rolemaster wasn't an option that I was this aware of a couple of months ago at the time of this recording. So it's really sort of a new thing that's come up, and I think it's great. And it gives me hope that there's going to be a lot more Middle Earth role-playing games out there. So anyway, thanks again for checking this stuff out. Obviously, I'm Art. Hopefully we'll be back soon, getting back to our normal rotation or more game stuff. Because obviously we're mainly a tabletop RPG actual play podcast channel. You can search, if you're watching this, you found our YouTube channel, so you can see all the stuff we've played. If you prefer audio versions of that, just search for Black Lodge Trivia Night wherever you get your podcast. We should show up. But yeah, that's the main thing what this channel is about. So, hopefully we can get that going again. We got a Discord, like I mentioned a couple of times. If you want to jump in, I'll try and annotate this with a bunch of links. But like I said, it's really crazy, and trying to maintain this arbitrary schedule that nobody cares if we maintain, sometimes make things like just squeaking by and getting it in under the radar. So we'll see how much I can get in before this video goes up. So anyway, thanks again for checking this stuff out. We really appreciate everybody who's jumped in, like, subscribe if that's your thing. But yeah, we always appreciate it. So thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye.